welcome to the first episode of the Transplant Kitchen on Paris Underground Radio, presented to you by us. I'm Omid Tavalai.
And I'm Alannah Tavalai.
We are otherwise known as Emperor Norton, and we make food for bars and cafés, events, and pop-ups around Paris and beyond. And because everyone asks what kind of food we make, our tagline is food from California, the American West, and the Pacific Rim. It took us a while to condense it into that, and it's a whole lot easier than going on a diatribe whenever someone asks, vous faites des burgers et des brownies?
But we're not here to talk about work. We're here to talk about adapting.
You mean like getting used to kisses on the cheek?
No.
Or having to say bonjour and merci every time you go in and out of someplace?
No.
So we're adapting culinarily, basically maintaining our identity as immigrants or expats, and making where we are feel like home by adapting recipes, taking the things we miss and love from home and making do with the ingredients and the resources we can find where we are. And so we hope that applies to our listeners too, wherever you may be, not just in France. For me, this process started a long time ago because I'm half Iranian, half Japanese, born in Iran with a mother from Japan who had to adapt the way she ate to being in the Middle East. And when I was very young, we moved to the United Kingdom. So I had Iranian and Japanese parents making do in London, which wasn't quite as cosmopolitan as it is now. And then next thing you know, we upped and moved to California, and here I was, a kid with Iranian, Japanese, and partially British palate, adapting to the west coast of the US. And then I grew up there, moved here, starting that process all over again.
And for me, my upbringing isn't quite as exotic as Omid's. My adapting was more specifically ingredients because as a little girl, I was allergic to
Everything.
Citrus, dairy, tomatoes, and for a time, wheat. So I was gluten-free before gluten-free was a thing. Or before they made gluten-free flour mixes.
And chocolate.
Oh, and chocolate. I've blocked that out. That was traumatic.
Because of all the carob.
Oh, please don't talk about carob.
You know, like hipsters are making liquor from carob now or something.
There's not enough liquor in the world to make carob tasty. And not chalky and gritty. And a huge, huge disappointment on Easter Sunday morning.
Oh. Well, with a vague idea of what this podcast is about, that being disappointment and chalky grittiness, let's get to this episode's subject, that's cake doughnuts, also known as our origin story, and we assure you that a recipe will follow. So how are cake doughnuts our origin story as cooks? How does this go?
Well, it all started with Robert Downey Jr. eating donuts in a giant donut.
I take it you're referring to our date night, watching Iron Man 2, because that's what romantic couples do here in the City of Light and Love and Romance. We go watch Marvel movies on a Tuesday night at the mall. I think that's what we did.
Yes, we went to the mall. Because we're classy.
And so, yeah, Robert Downey Jr. is sitting in the Randy's Donut sign from L.A., eating a box of donuts, and we both just kind of looked at each other and said, cake donuts.
So good.
And so when the movie let out, like around midnight or something like that, we really just wanted some cake donuts. The thing is, this isn't the West Coast of the United States. It's not New York. It's not Texas, probably, where you could go get donuts at midnight. This is Paris, where you're not going to go and get anything at midnight. Certainly not donuts. Maybe there's a donut kebab shop somewhere.
Doubt it.
Maybe these days somebody will make one for Instagram.
Oh, God.
So we ended up making donuts at home that very night. We looked up some recipes for cake donuts and tried, I don't know how many of them out.
Ugh. I think we did a couple of recipes, but then we kept fine-tuning.
Right. And by 4:30 in the morning, we had like 4 dozen, and I ate most of them. It didn't make for a very good morning after and having to go to work back when I had a day job. But we also took a whole bunch of pictures of the process and blogged about it so we can show our friends back home, as it were, what a pain in the ass it was if you had a craving at midnight for something you could normally just go and pick up anywhere. So we blogged about making donuts. Then the next thing we were craving was like tacos and tamales. And because there was no tamale lady here to get them all drunk at 2 a.m. in the bar, we had to make them while drunk at 2 a.m. And local people here caught wind of that and like, hey, where do I get this stuff? And we're like, and the blogging led to dinner parties. The dinner parties led to pop-ups. The pop-ups led to brunches with long lines and led to supplying cafés with this kind of stuff. And, that's how we kind of made a living out of it. But coming back around to why donuts?
Why not donuts?
Because we wanted them. And you just couldn't get them.
Could not get cake donuts.
No, you certainly couldn't. There were those, like, beignets, but not like New Orleans beignets,
No.
but like, just round, puffy, insignificant donuts at boulangeries. I don't know. They weren't good. They've never been good. And now you can get donuts in Paris. I'm going to give a shout out to our friends Bone Shaker and 10 Bells, who make very good donuts. You should go check them out if you're in town. But yeah, after a life of eating donuts pretty much everywhere, it was really hard. I grew up on the donut wheel during high school. If any of you are Apple people, you probably know the place in Cupertino, 24-hour donut shop, really good, like bars. We used to study there in high school, basically taking advantage of delicious donuts and unlimited coffee refills, another thing we don't really have here in France. In college, it was Stan's in Westwood, which went through many different iterations, the best of which was when it was Stan's Donuts and Indian food, if anyone remembers that. And then in adulthood, Happy Donuts, a 24-hour place in San Francisco and also near Stanford University. It was just a life of 24-hour donut places everywhere, and it was just a normal part of existence.
See, and for me, donuts weren't a 24-hour thing. They were some place you had to go to at like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning to pick them up because they were only open until like 3 in the afternoon if they didn't run out earlier. But we sold donuts in high school to raise money for the various clubs and associations. Like you would be sitting in chemistry class and someone would just come in with a big flat of donuts for 25 cents. My driver's ed teacher actually generally had us drive him to a donut shop for our early morning practice drives.
Is that like child exploitation or something?
Well, we also went to the boat shop so he could buy stuff for his boat, so...
At least he gave you donuts and not like baked.
No, he
right?
didn't give us the donuts.
Oh, jeez.
They were just for him. And then my family got donuts before or after getting on the ferry to go from Seattle over to the Olympic Peninsula.
Oh, is that the place your family started taking me at Pike's Place Market?
Pike Place Market?
The Daily Dozen.
Yes.
With the donut robot.
Hot donuts in a paper bag.
Yes. And they stay hot surprisingly long.
They're so good.
And since then, whenever we're back in the States, we road trip around the West Coast trying the best donuts. My favorite being Blue Star in Portland. Their buttermilk old fashioned is, as far as I'm concerned, the best donut on earth. So yeah, we like donuts. Did you know by French law, we actually have to say when we're taking a commercial break?
Yes.
Take it away, Alannah.
I don't know what you want me to
You
say.
say we'll be right back.
We'll be right back.
With more Transplant Kitchen.
Hi, welcome to Wine Dine Caroline's Happy Hour. I'm Caroline Connor, a wine expert living in Lyon, France, where I am otherwise known as Wine Dine Caroline. Now, this isn't your average wine podcast. You can join me at Happy Hour, where I'll be meeting with friends, new and old, to hear a funny, stupid, or just all-out ridiculous story from their life. and then I'll pair a wine with it. Join us for belly laughs, silliness, and lots of love. Cheers!
Is Paris the most romantic city in the world? It is, but there's much more to its romantic allure than the Eiffel Tower. The Romancing in Paris podcast aims to reveal the true romantic essence of the city. Secret gardens, hidden historic sites, and terribly seductive bars. Join romantic expert and writer Lily Heisey as we discover the city's best romantic spots, ideal for both curious couples and lovers of Paris alike. Ready to experience the real romantic Paris? Tune into the Romancing in Paris podcast every Wednesday on Paris Underground Radio. Visit parisundergroundradio.com/romancing in Paris to listen and subscribe.
And we're back from commercials, because we're supposed to say that. I guess what we should do is talk about the kinds of donuts there are. There are fried donuts and there are baked donuts.
Those are not donuts.
No?
No. Those are muffins with holes in the middle.
Hey, muffins are good.
Or they're little bundt cakes. Those are not donuts.
I think we can make mini bundt cakes a thing. I don't know. Okay. So let's forget about baked donuts. Among the fried canon, there are raised donuts. What are those?
Raised donuts are made with a yeast-based dough, kind of like a brioche type dough.
Okay.
So you add yeast to the dough, which requires some time to rise after you've made your dough. And then you shape the dough, and then you have to let it rise some more before you actually fry it.
Okay, so it's a bit time-consuming.
A little.
Yeah. But what kind of donut does that yield?
Filled donuts are almost always yeast donuts.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can get the pocket in the middle to fill.
Okay.
Maple bars, bacon maple bars.
Mm-hmm.
Usually those cinnamon twist ones.
Yeah.
Are yeast donuts.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're the puffy, fluffy, lighter than air when made right.
Yeah, correctly made.
And the other kind is what we're talking about today. That's cake donuts. Maybe you can define that.
So cake donuts are made using what you would call a quick bread batter. There's no proofing required. You don't have to go set it off to rise at all. You just make your batter, shape your dough, and into the fryer it goes.
Sounds fairly straightforward, and that's why we like it, because it's quick and we're hungry.
No, because it's like cake, but better.
And what kind of donuts are based on this cake donut dough?
The
or
best
batter?
donut in the entire universe, old-fashioned.
I see. What are there other kinds that are cake donuts?
Usually when you get a pumpkin donut, it's made using cake donut batter or the
Perfect with a pumpkin spice latte.
Yeah, apple cider donuts usually are.
Perfect with an apple cider latte.
No.
But old fashions, that's the most important one.
Yes.
Buttermilk old fashioned.
Yeah.
Best on earth. Our cake donut recipe that we're going to get to here contains both baking soda and baking powder as the leavening agents.
Right.
Why?
Actually, a lot of recipes use both baking powder and baking soda. I think to explain why, first I need to go into what each of them is and does.
Okay.
Baking soda, also known as sodium bicarbonate, is an alkaline leavening agent. That means that it requires an acid, buttermilk, yogurt, lemon juice, vinegar, something like that, to make it react. Mm-hmm. And when it reacts, it creates carbon dioxide gas, which are bubbles, which are the things that make something fluffy and not flat and hard.
So that's why we put buttermilk in certain baked goods, not because it makes it rich and creamy. Well maybe we do, but it also makes the reaction happen with the baking soda.
Yes.
Okay, so buttermilk biscuits
would
be
so
flat
good.
without the buttermilk.
They just wouldn't be as fluffy.
Okay.
And then baking powder is actually made using baking soda.
Okay.
As well as an acid and a starch.
Okay.
The starch in baking powder is to keep the baking soda and whatever acid it's being paired with from getting damp, because once they get damp, they're going to start reacting, and then the baking powder is no longer any good to you.
It's like a snail with salt on it.
And then the starch also allows the mixture to be integrated into your batter without clumping. So the acid part can be actually a number of different things, and the acid is what determines whether or not your baking powder is single acting, meaning it only reacts once, or double acting, which means it reacts twice. Early baking powders, and the ones we generally find here in France, were single acting, meaning they only reacted once, and they used acids like cream of tartar, which starts its reaction once it gets wet. Later baking powders are double acting, so they react first when they become wet, and then the second time they create bubbles when they are heated. So put in the oven, put in the fryer.
Gotcha. Make it wet and hot.
And those use acids like alum, which is potassium aluminum sulfate, which can have a slightly metallic taste.
So why are we putting this in our food?
Or sodium acid pyrophosphate, which can have a slight bitter taste.
Pyrophosphate. That doesn't sound much better. So again, why are we putting this in our food? If it sounds like that and it makes it bitter.
Because they make things fluffy.
Okay, all right. So there's a little trade-off. We're slowly poisoning ourselves. Maybe not. I'm not going to... Okay, hold on. I'm not going to be anti-science and be like, oh, these things with many syllables are bad for you. Exactly. They're probably just fucking fine.
So the single-acting and the double-acting baking powders are basically the same as far as using them in a recipe. You don't have to super stress if you don't have double-acting baking powder.
Okay.
You can generally just...
Because when I go to the supermarket here, I don't know what kind of fucking baking powder I'm buying.
It's all single-acting, just so you know. In the grocery stores here.
Just like the men here. They're single-acting.
Help me. So the small differences between the two are single acting is not good for recipes where you're going to make the batter or the dough and then let it sit for extended periods of time. Like with a yeast dough, for example, you would make something and then put it into proof overnight in the fridge. You can't do that with a single acting baking powder dough.
Okay.
It's too long. However, double-acting baking powder is not good for recipes that have alkaline ingredients like many fruit because it can become bitter.
So basically, if you are one of those people into pseudoscience and you put alkaline water and everything, don't use the single-acting baking powder. I don't know.
Now that we've gone through all that, you might be wondering if baking powder has baking soda in it, why are we also adding baking soda to the recipe?
You read my mind.
Okay, but that's going back to how some of the ingredients in baking powder, the acids, can make things a bit bitter. Adding baking soda means you don't have to use as much baking powder. So if you use both of them at the same time, you get the benefit of the baking powder, which has kind of a delayed reaction. So it doesn't go flat before you actually bake or fry it. But adding a little bit of baking soda kind of amps up the power of the baking powder.
Wow. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Alannah McPherson-Tavalai, holder of a degree in studio art from a small liberal arts college, dropping some knowledge on chemical leavening agents. And for the lay person like myself who wants to go and just buy this stuff at the store here in France, baking powder, that's poudre à lever or levure chimique.
Right.
Chemical leavener. Okay. And then baking soda is bicarbonate de soude?
Mm-hmm.
Or bicarbonate alimentaire?
Right.
So when I want to buy, I've seen it next to the cleaning products.
Do not do that.
No.
No. Only use baking soda, bicarbonate de soude, that is labeled for alimentaire, for use as food.
Okay.
Because they are made, the one near the cleaning supplies, the one near the cleaning supplies is not intended for food, for consumption.
Is it adulterated with other stuff for cleaning, or?
No, I've checked the ingredients list. It's always just straight baking soda, but who knows if there's any cross-contamination from where it's made. There are less regulations on it because they're not intending for you to eat it.
Okay.
So it's just generally not a good idea.
Okay. So baking powder with multi-syllabate ingredients, okay. Baking soda that doesn't say for human ingestion, not okay.
Right.
The Transplant Kitchen will be back after a word from our sponsors.
While walking the streets of Paris, do curious details ever catch your eye? The city has a myriad of lieux cachés, or hidden places, and we uncover the most intriguing ones on the Paris Cachet podcast. If you're keen to explore Paris on a deeper level, then join Paris Cachet host Lily Heisey and a cast of zany historical figures from queens to angry mobs as we traverse the city and the centuries on our quest to discover the surprising stories behind these lieux cachés. The Paris Cachet podcast is available every other Sunday on Paris Underground Radio. Visit parisundergroundradio.com/Paris Cachet to listen and subscribe.
What bra are you wearing right now? Whether you're smiling from ear to ear because you love your bra, or whether you winced because you're wearing, yet again, something you'd rather not, tune into Paris Undressed, the podcast that goes behind the seams of the lingerie capital of the world. Hi, I'm Kate Kemp Griffin, author and host of Paris Undressed. From boudoir to the street, we'll explore the art of making and wearing French lingerie. We'll meet the designers and brands shaping our bodies and talk to fascinating people about femininity, sensuality, and sexuality. We'll share bra stories, secrets, desires, hopes, and dreams. This is the ultimate special occasion. So put on your favorite bra and tune into Paris Undressed, Tuesdays on Paris Underground Radio.
And now, back to the Transplant Kitchen.
And without further ado, here's the recipe. You can get it on the Paris Underground Radio website. You don't need to copy it down while we're reading it. And we'll also be sure to link it on our socials, etc., etc. This is to make about 1 dozen cake donuts. You're going to need 420 grams of T65 flour. That is if you're in France. Back home, that would be 3.5 cups of all-purpose. 1 tablespoon of baking powder, a half teaspoon of baking soda, 1 teaspoon of salt, 200 grams of what we call here sucre poudre, and that's granulated sugar, not American powdered sugar or icing sugar, as the Brits would call it, 2 eggs, half a teaspoon of vanilla extract, and that's an option. Now, there's a difference between French vanilla extract and American vanilla extract. I don't know about the rest of the world, but once again, Professor Alannah.
So in the United States, generally, the vanilla extract you get is in an alcohol solution. In France, it is usually in a sugar solution, so like a thick sugar syrup.
And does that make any difference in your recipe other than the fact that you can get yourself a little drunk while nipping at the bottle?
It doesn't make a huge difference. If you're making something with a lot of vanilla and a small amount of whatever you're making, it might make it a bit sweeter than you're used to if you're using the French syrup-based one. Otherwise, it doesn't really impact it.
And you should just stay away from fake vanilla, right?
Yes.
Moving on. 64 grams of melted European butter or European style butter, or 1/3 of a cup of North American butter. Again, here's a little side note.
If you are using Kerrygold butter, that is European style butter, so you should use the European butter measurement.
The 64 grams,
Correct.
all metric as we do here. You want 240 milliliters of crème fraîche. That would be 1 cup of sour cream. And sunflower or canola oil, enough for deep frying. Additionally, you're going to need a mixing bowl, a rolling pin, a donut cutter, which you probably don't have because we sure as hell didn't, or a ring or a glass and a smaller cutter. What would you recommend using?
Oh, back in the day when I didn't have a ton of kitchen stuff, I used a pint glass and a shot glass.
That'll work. So we've gone from alcohol-based vanilla to pint glasses, shot glasses. I think I see where this is all leading to. You'll need a pot for frying all this stuff in if you don't have a deep fryer. Interestingly enough, when we first moved here, deep fryers were kind of a thing. They were marketed pretty heavily to, busy moms?
There was a campaign for a while when we first arrived to have deep fryers so that you could make French fries for your kids when they came home from school for their afternoon goûter.
Which is snack.
Yes.
And as a busy mom yourself, would you be doing any of that bullshit?
No, because I live in France and there's a boulangerie on every corner.
Boulangeries don't have fries.
No.
Well, you're not going to feed our growing daughter fries as an after school snack.
No, because she's either going to have the brioche twist with chocolate chips or a ham and cheese sandwich.
Besides, we're modern. We use air fryers. No, we don't. And finally, you will probably want an oil thermometer. Even if you do have your own deep fryer, an oil thermometer is handy to give you an accurate reading of the oil temperature. And that's probably one of the most important parts of this recipe. So what you're going to do is you're going to combine all the dry ingredients, then work in the wet ingredients, obviously not the oil. And once the dough has come together, like how together do you want it? Do you just do like loosely come together like a pancake batter? Or do you whip the shit out of it? Like,
You want something kind of in between. You want it completely mixed with no lumps, but you don't want to over mix it or it will become tough and kind of gross.
All right. And then you want to wrap it or put it in a container and chill it. Like in the fridge for 30 minutes?
Yeah, about 30 minutes.
Okay. And why do we chill it?
Because this dough is hella sticky. So if we're going to roll it out and cut it out, no amount of flour will save you if you don't chill it first.
Okay. So chill it, then roll it out with some flour on a board or
Flat surface.
on a flat surface. Okay.
Of your choice.
All right. And then we say, going back to American measurements, 1/2 inch to 2/3 of an inch thick. That would be what? 1.5, 2 centimeters or so?
It's not my area. Sorry. I was an art major.
And then cut the rounds and the holes into them. And what you want to do is lay out a tray with parchment paper that's also been dusted with flour to put your cut out donuts and holes so they don't stick while you're waiting for your oil to heat up if you haven't preheated it already. And you want that temperature to be about between 165 to 175 degrees Celsius before you put some donuts in and fry it for 1 minute the first side, 1.5 minutes the second side, then flip it back over and give it another 30 seconds on the first side. You're going to want to experiment with those cooking times. You may end up making 4 dozen in the process, but because all our doughs, our temperatures, the depth of our oil is going to vary, your results are going to vary, and you're just going to have to dial in that perfect donut over the course of a few of them. And that's okay. You do that, we'll do making pancakes, right? Like, everything takes a little bit of dialing in on the first few. So don't sweat it, just go for it. But also very important, in addition to the temperature, is that after you're done frying a donut and you pull it out, you wait for your oil to come back to temperature before putting the next one in. This is, I believe, medically called a refractory period. But you want to do this to make sure that your oil isn't too cold or that it doesn't become way too cold when you put new stuff into it. Am I saying this right?
Well, basically what happens is when you have your oil at temp and then you add the donut in, the dough, but the dough is cold and significantly cooler than the oil. So as it goes in, it cools down your oil. So when you take the cooked donut out, you actually do have to wait for it to come back up to temperature. Even if you have a deep fryer, it won't be able to maintain the same temperature the entire time if you're dropping balls of cold dough in it.
Gotcha. And when you're pulling them out, I would say pull them out with a spider or a slotted spoon, or very, very carefully with tongs. You don't want to squeeze it and break the donut. Or you can be like my mom and use like giant wooden chopsticks, like any good Asian.
I use a fork.
At home, not professionally.
Well,
I'll
we say.
I'll admit to professionally, when we were doing that brunch pop-up at Rice and Fish, I did use my hands on occasion to flip or pull out donuts.
Well, because if you just push on one side, they flip right over.
Yeah, exactly. By the way, you know what? Just don't do this at home.
Please use
the right utensils. Thank you. We don't want to be liable for missing fingers. And when you do take them out, put them on like a wire rack or a tray lined with paper towels. Is there a difference between those?
Well, a wire rack would be the best solution because you have better oil drainage than putting them on paper towels in a tray.
Okay. So I don't know. Maybe it's an aesthetic issue. I've noticed when I put stuff that's like kind of hot and tender on a wire rack, I get imprints on the bottom. And I don't like the imprints.
Oh, see, and I like the imprints because it shows me that person properly drained the oil at the end. If you really don't like the rack marks, you can actually put a paper towel on top of the rack before putting the donuts on them.
Very clever. Okay. And then what you want to do is, dust it in cinnamon sugar or powdered sugar, or maybe make a glaze. And we do the cinnamon sugar while it's hot. But the powdered sugar you don't want to do while it's like hot and fresh out of the fryer because
it just kind of dissolves and melts into. You want to give the oil a chance to soak in to the surface a little bit, and for the donut just to cool down a smidge.
Okay. But really, there's nothing better than a hot donut and cinnamon sugar. Yeah. So there you have it, a pretty basic rundown on how to make cake donuts. And you are going to make some, right? Because it sounds scary, but it isn't. We would not have shared this, and certainly not for our first podcast, if we didn't think you could do it. A lot of people say they're afraid of pastry or baking type stuff. Don't be. It's really about measuring properly. And even more people have told me, whether we're talking about donuts or chicken or wontons, that they're afraid of deep frying. Again, don't be. Just be careful. Don't do anything stupid like dropping ice in your deep fryer. Not that I've ever done that. There's really nothing to be afraid of. We've been doing this for years. Neither of us has lost any appendages. You're
not building confidence with all of
Okay,
this.
Sorry. We've been doing this for years, and neither of us has gone blind from splashing hot water.
Oh my God.
Okay, seriously though, there is nothing to be afraid of. Just be prudent, be careful. It's not deep frying a turkey. It is donuts. You can totally do it. You got this. Don't be afraid of it. But do be afraid of anyone who offers you baked donuts.
Those are not donuts.
Right.
And that person is not your friend.
Mini bundt cakes. Let's go back into the garnishing real quick. I said hot cinnamon sugar donuts. There's nothing better except buttermilk old fashions. Best on earth. We talked about powdered sugar. Talked about glaze. Alannah, why don't you give everyone a little primer on how to make a glaze? Because I F it up every time. You somehow nail it.
Well, the trick with with making a glaze, a really basic, easy glaze, is you put powdered sugar in a bowl, and then you add whatever your chosen liquid is, milk, juice, maple syrup even, a little bit at a time. Like, think as if you're adding it with an eyedropper. Because powdered...
Could you just use an eyedropper?
You could, actually.
Why don't we have an eyedropper? Why don't I have an eyedropper for doing this?
So you can make your glaze with pretty much any liquid. You can even use beer. You can use your favorite booze.
And do you pour the glaze over it, or do you, dunk the top half of the donut in it? What's a better method? Is there a better method, or?
It really depends on what you like. You definitely need to wait for the donut to cool before adding the glaze for it to stick. But you can depending on the donut, a lot of time old-fashioned donuts, they actually just dip the whole donut in a thin glaze and then put it on a wire rack to drain off.
No, I'm telling you though, cinnamon sugar is the way to go. Hold on. So take your main cake donut, put it in the cinnamon sugar, shake a donut hole in the cinnamon sugar, put the donut on a really nice white plate, and then put the donut hole on top of the hole of the main donut. And what you have here is the way they present a cinnamon sugar cake donut at the French Laundry of all places. So I want you to go and do this and say, I listened to this podcast and I learned how to make dessert from the goddamn French Laundry. No? No, but try it. Hot, fresh donuts are life-changing. They literally were for us. Just be a little more prudent than we were and share the damn things if you end up making 4 dozen while trying to nail the perfect donut rather than eating them all yourself. Trust me. And again, you can find the recipe on Paris Underground Radio's website. If you try it out, give us your feedback, give us a shout. Post a picture of it and tag us so we can do that whole sharing thing. We are at Norton of Paris on Instagram.
And I'm Hannala, Hannala, which is my name backwards.
And I'm at Tavalai, Tavallai, which is my family name forward. So, à la prochaine fois in the Transplant Kitchen on Paris Underground Radio. Bye.
Bye.